So when you look at all the numbers, you're going to save about $1,500 using the Avalanche method versus the Snowball method. But is that really all that matters? Hey everyone, welcome back to Modern Mindset. Over the last year, people have lost their jobs or have had a reduction in their income or just have had to tap into their savings in order to pay for their day-to-day expenses. And those savings have only gone so far for a lot of people, and then they've had to go into debt. Over 51 million Americans have actually had to increase their credit card debt over this last year. It's hard to blame people for having to go into debt, especially with the circumstances that happened over this last year. But now that things are starting to go back to normal, we're gonna have to start addressing this debt that people have actually built up. There are two main philosophies around resolving debt. Number one is called the Debt Snowball, and number two is called the Avalanche Method. But I guess if I'm gonna make a video about finance, I need to address the part. Alright, that's better, but not quite. I'll be back. I think that's more right. I think I looked the part now. So let's get back to it. Firstly, before you choose either method, you need to solve the number one problem. You need to make it so that your expenses do not exceed your income, or vice versa. You need to make sure that you have more income coming in than you have money going out. And if you need some help with that, you can watch this video right here, which will help you give you some tips on saving and stuff like that. Once you have some discretionary income at the end of the month, we can start to tackle your debt. We'll start with the one that you've probably heard of, the Debt Snowball, made popular by Dave Ramsey, who's a very controversial and public figure around finance. If you haven't heard of him, you've probably at least seen his face somewhere in the finance world or in the Christian world or anything like that. But we're gonna focus on his financial ideas over his personality and his other more controversial viewpoints. So the philosophy around the Debt Snowball tells you to care about just the amount of the debt rather than anything to do with any kind of interest rates or anything like that. So basically what you do is you pay the minimum amount on all your debts every month. But any excess money you have, you pay towards the smallest debt you have. The idea is to create momentum. This ideology focuses on keeping the person in debt motivated and working towards debt freedom the entire time. By tackling these smaller debts, you're able to see progress much easier. You're able to see these debts be completely removed and it becomes a big win for you. So then you stay motivated. You're like, all right, well, I just paid off this entire bill and I don't have to pay it anymore. So you're more motivated to keep going with it over and over again until you manage to tackle your next debt. And you basically keep rinsing and repeating this cycle until you pay off all your debt. Now onto the Avalanche method. This method also has you paying the minimum amount on all accounts throughout the month. But instead of focusing on the smallest amount, you're focusing on the largest interest on an account. This method can be a little more difficult for the person who's not as disciplined. Since you're focusing on the interest rate, it's actually possible that you may be trying to pay off your largest debt first. So you may not actually see that progress for a longer period of time. And thus, you won't get this instant gratification like you do with the Snowball method. But by focusing on paying off the debt with the highest interest over the highest amount, you're likely to pay less interest over time. So let's take a look at this base example with these 5 debts. I use this tool that I'm gonna put in the description for basically to plug in these debts and see what the different amounts were for the Avalanche method versus the Snowball method. But I basically plugged in these 5 debts and basically applied a minimum amount each month that I would pay. Now with all the numbers inputted, let's say you have about $700 a month to pay off your debt. So the Snowball method would take you about 41 months in order to pay off that $19,000 of debt. It would also cost you about an extra $9,000 to a total of $28,000 in order to pay off all that debt. On the other hand, the Avalanche method would take you about 39 months and cost you about $26,500 in order to pay off that $19,000 of debt. So when you look at all the numbers, you're gonna save about $1,500 using the Avalanche method versus the Snowball method. But is that really all that matters? Because $1,500 is a good chunk of change, but that's over 4 years. So you're really only saving $30 a month. And you're also only paying off your debt 2 months faster than if you would use the Snowball method. So with that in mind, I guess you're wondering which method you should use. And you're in luck because both work. If you're able to be consistent and disciplined with the Avalanche method, you're likely to pay off your debt quicker and for less money. But in the end, it's not all about how fast you can get it done, but the fact that you actually get that debt paid off. So the Snowball method works just as well. With all that said, it's actually pretty interesting if you go and play around with that tool I linked in the description and see how the different interest rates and amounts actually affect the different methods and their actual difference between them. I was actually pretty surprised to find that the Avalanche method actually is less efficient in some situations. Which is why if you're in debt, I would recommend you go and play with it. It's not gonna take you much more than 30 seconds to 2 minutes to input your numbers, and you can just play with different ways of paying it off and see which one works best for you. Because both methods have their merit. And both of them will help you get out of your debt crisis. Debt is a problem that you just don't want to leave under your bed and hope it goes away. Take your first steps towards dealing with your debt problems so that you're able to walk through life without debt collectors chasing you through your dreams. If you enjoyed this kind of content, smash that like button so I know to make more of it in the future. But with that said, thanks for watching the video and see you next week on Modern Mindset.